Hey friends, happy Tuesday. Scott Barber here at the Grace Community Church with another message here, another devotion on resilient joy here from the book of Philippians. We're in Philippians chapter 1, verse 12 and 13 again here, just because what Paul demonstrates in these verses is so powerful. So I want to start off first with the question of just checking in. How are you doing with your normal routine, your normal life being disrupted? Or maybe you're kind of experiencing that growing tension inside of you, like me, of I want things to go back to normal, right? I want to return to that sense of normal freedom and ability to connect with other people, and just a longing for things to just go back to normal. I mean, maybe you feel that kind of wrestling inside of you. It reminded me of some trips that I've taken overseas, and just kind of that homesickness that I experienced when Jane and I were in India several years back. Towards the end of the 2 weeks there, I had gotten sick with a cold and was really longing for normal. I just wanted familiar food. I just wanted my bed. I wanted normal back. I didn't feel well, and in order to kind of have that internal sense of peace and joy, if you will, happiness, I wanted things to go back to normal. I was homesick. I experienced the same thing when we were in Costa Rica for a couple weeks, again towards that end of time, having that homesickness, that longing for normal. And maybe you're experiencing that now. If you're not experiencing it now, friends, we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to get honest about the circumstances that we're in under the COVID-19 era, and that is that these shutdowns, this life that we're in right now, may go on for several more months. Okay, and it's hard for our minds to wrap itself around that. There's a resistance. There's kind of what we call denial of that happening. But how can we be resilient? How can we have joy in the midst of our normalcy being disrupted? First off, it's recognizing that our joy isn't dependent on our normalcy. Our joy isn't contingent on our life being back to normal. And you're going to experience that desire. I want it to go back. And a sadness, depression, even anger and frustration that things aren't going back to normal. Well, Paul and the Philippians experience similar types of things, and he turns in verse 12 of chapter 1 to encourage the Philippians. He says, I want you to know, brothers, there was something important here for them to hear in this time, that things are not normal. Paul's not free. He's not leading the charge. He's not out in front setting the example and being that great missionary of the good news of Jesus like everybody wants him to be. Things aren't normal. He's locked up. Philippians, their life isn't normal. They're under persecution. They're under the threat of physical harm and economic discrimination, and things aren't normal for them. They want it to go back to normal. So he says, I want you to know this. In the midst of the snow globe of our lives being shaken up, that what's happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, so that it's become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. What Paul's demonstrating here is that he could see opportunities in the loss of his normal, in the loss of control of his life. Paul, did you know Paul was in prison for 2 years? All right, we are 1 month into this COVID-19 change and the restrictions that are put upon us. Paul spent 2 years in prison. He had to come to grips with the fact that life wasn't going to continue to be normal the way he had experienced it. What enabled him to be resilient? He saw in his circumstances, the changes, the restrictions of freedom, all the things taken away. He saw opportunities when things had changed. He saw opportunities. What gave him the ability to do that? Because he wasn't holding on to his circumstances being his normal. What was his norm? His new norm was the rule of Jesus Christ in his life. Not his control, but the control of Jesus in his life. Remember, we talked about this, friends. God's got this, but does God have you? There's a big difference in our hearts and our lives. And the resilience that Paul has, the resilience of joy that we can have, comes from not from us having our circumstances in our control, but God having them and God having control over us. Paul was gripped by the risen Jesus Christ, and we celebrate that this week. His heart, his normalcy was the rule and reign of Jesus Christ, not his control. And so he saw opportunity in his circumstances. He didn't seek for normalcy to be brought back. He was able to adapt to his new normal. That's what happens when Christ and his rule and reign is what is our normal in our season, in all seasons of our lives. So what opportunity do you see? Paul saw that he had a captive audience. He was imprisoned, but you know what? All the guards, they were stuck with Paul. He had a captive audience. They couldn't get away because they had to watch Paul. They had to make sure he wouldn't leave. And so he had a captive audience to share with them the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. He saw opportunities in the midst of his opposition. That's resilient joy. So today, first off, how can you release your expectations of what's normal? Okay, we're going to go through this season where it's going to be hard. We're going to be experiencing a transition. You're going to want things to go back to normal. But when we focus on the rule and reign of Jesus in our lives, that is the normal that we hold on to, we can see opportunities and we can adapt like Paul. So how can you see opportunities today, this week, as we come to grips with things aren't going to change? They're not going back anytime soon. And things will never be the same. But that doesn't have to destroy our joy or take it away, because our joy isn't dependent on our normalcy, on our sense of normalcy, because Jesus is King, the resurrected King. So how can you see opportunities today, friends? How can you receive the rule and reign of Jesus as your normal? Be blessed.